Hello, welcome to Philosophy Roulette number 178, where we read and review philosophy. I've taken a few weeks off, but now I'm back. I don't know how much I'm going to do, like as far as my schedule goes, but let's just see what's going on in the world of new journal articles to be read. Woo! Find out. Revista Philosophy. I do not read this language, unfortunately. That's very sad. So let's see what else we got. Let's get past this. Front page of the Philosophy Internet. Archive. The usual suspects. Archive for mathematical logic. Characterizing Brouwer's continuity by bar recursion on moduli of continuity. Can't read too many stuff with too much mathematical or scientific content because then I'm just sitting there reading out numbers. Archive for the psychology of religion of being moderate and peaceful. Why Islamic political moderate? Why not? Maybe I'll take a look. Argumentation. I like argumentation. I'll just click on the journal, see if they have a new set of papers coming out on early access. British Journal for the History of Science. Take a look there. Looks like a bunch of reviews. Cognition's interesting, but it's often quite sciencey. Yeah, see, phonological violation between... they're doing a science thing on how we interpret the sounds of different words. I don't know what paraphovale is, but they must be sort of mixing two words together. So how do we interpret language? Complexity, again, too much science for me, usually. Signal stability and whatnot. But again, sometimes their philosophical content is super interesting because then they have like really interesting stuff. Disputatio, and we'll take a look over there. Foundations of Chemistry. The history of chemistry is an interesting beast. It really is. See, like deep learning era in chemistry. I can't even at the moment. Neuroscience, too much science again. Frontiers in psychology, maybe? Alright, maybe I'll come back to that. History of science. I like history of science, so you get a click, although I doubt I'll read anything. This is International Philosophical Quarterly. I don't know. I'll give it a click real quick. Argumentation in context. I've never seen that before, so I'll click it. And let's see. Alright, let's start taking a look at what we have. Looks like not available. I don't know the length. That's unfortunate. Argumentation. So let's see. Argumentation. Mencius. The words Mencius. Interesting. So this could be cool. What is that? Like 9 pages? That's really... Let's see if this is available. No, not available. Come on, people. Upload your papers. ResearchGate, maybe? Let's see how many... Oh, in the form of a book review. Oh, interesting. Okay, so it's a book review. Yeah, so it's in the philosophy commentary and this. Alright, so maybe I don't like reading book reviews because I haven't read the book and I don't know what I'm talking about. So, although I have had other reviews been very interesting. Alright, corrections, definite description, and argument in Gettyer's 10 coins examples. 10 coins, hypothetical sentences. Reasoning errors, indefinite descriptions. Well, maybe. Case of visual argumentation. Take a look at that. Take a look at this. Arguing terror. Interesting. I think and this is back to where I've seen this one before. Alright. Let's see. Is this one available? Alright, not gonna look at that then. And I think I looked at this once. Yeah. This 10 coins thing. So, and it's not available. That's why I didn't do it. Alright, so let's take a quick look at the history of science. These are all reviews. Retrospective. Yeah, okay. So, these are all... They put out a bunch of book reviews, which is cool. So these are all from 2019 in Disputatio. Let's see what forthcoming is. Nope, no book. I always keep forgetting to change that thing. History of science. Let's see what they have. Self-tracking is an introduction. Okay, nope. IFQ. Do I know anything about IFQ? Not really. What'd I just do? Oopsie. Holding the control button down, I touched my mouse. For the most part, generalizations on practical wisdom, self-knowledge, and a refutation of the immaterial of human nature on an epistemical argument reported by Razi. That's 10 pages. This is, let's get into the limit 16. So let's see what this one is, if it's available. Recurs hermeneutics of religion, rebirth of the capable self, review. Defeated ambivalence. Alright, let's click on this one. I have a sense that I might have looked at this stuff here already, though. So let's see if this is... Okay, we have a paper. Let's see what this looks like. It's a doc. I did look at this. You only get the first 2 pages here. That's sad. Okay, so not gonna happen then. Defeated ambivalence. Let's see if this is here. Another doc. Is this the same one, or did I... Oh, no, and it's 33 pages now. Okay, that's not happening. So it'll take me 2 hours. Alright, Journal of Argumentation and Context. Never seen that before. But they have no short papers. And they have no page count at all. Argumentation in Nigerian Investigative Public Hearings. Cool. The Argument and the Honeypot. What? Seduction Contests. Honeypot. Let's just click on that because that sounds like fun. It's like some sort of trap. A honeypot. Yeah, manipulation. Oh well. Yeah, it's too long anyway. It's good like 23 pages, but that's cool. Alright, so we might have to go back to... I don't want to do book reviews. Alright, so... Let's give it another quick search for... No, what we'll go quickly over to Phil Archive and see what's on the front page of that. Alright, tourist destinations, interesting. Journal of Geology, Geography, and Geoecology. Interesting stuff you get on these places. This one is Semantic, Blindness, and Error Theorizing. That looks like very hard. Oh, it's an analysis paper, though. Definitely short. Alright, so... I was going to click off of it because it might have been too sciencey, but... Jurisprudence. That's kind of cool, but 16 pages. If I have an analysis paper, I'll do that shorter one. Aristotle and the Search for a Rational Framework for Biology. That's cool. Alright. So if anyone out there has any opinions on what I should read, let me know. I always take suggestions. Anscombe's Relative Bruteness. Philosophical News. What is philosophical news? What is a sign? On being bound to linguistic norms, reply. Huh. Okay, so looks like I got a few more things to read. Let's take a look at this analysis paper quick. 14 pages, double spaced. That's kind of... I like seeing that. Okay, let's that's like almost guaranteed to be good for me. I like that. Okay, and see, there's 11 pages, but it's a double column, so it's more like 20 pages. Still might read this one. I'm gonna like hold on to this. You know what? I'm gonna pull this over here. Look at that. See, this is the paper I said I think I saw. I had it saved. Defeated Ambivalence from a long time ago. And let's hey, Bewitched Frog. Did you? Did I not see that? I don't recall seeing that. Oh man, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Bewitched Frog. Send your question again, and I will try to get to it. I didn't. I don't recall seeing that, so maybe it didn't get through for some reason. I mean, I don't know how much help I can give you, but... Oh, I did? Oh, good. Well, hey, if I can be smart even when I don't remember stuff... Oh, was it on stream? Or did you, Yeah, it was on stream, that's right. I thought you sent me, like, an email. However... Don't expect me to remember anything from, like, more than, like, 5 minutes ago. And even 5 minutes ago is very questionable. Now, let's just take a look at this Anscombe's relative bruteness. Let's see what this even looks like. Huh. I don't know. Maybe... Alright, let's hold on to this one, too, because that's kind of cool. But I'm just partial to, like, analysis papers. Alright, so this is a book review, which makes... I don't like doing book reviews. Alright, so we're going to read this one. Well, did I say anything smart is the real question, Bewitched Frog. I suppose you're still here, so I must have not said something completely stupid. Yes! Congratulations! Congratulations! I mean, of course, it's your decision where you want to go. But the fact that you got the offer is amazing. Congratulations. Means someone likes you. They really like you. Okay. Or at least they're willing to take a chance on you. And, yeah. So. Okay, that is really, really cool, Bewitched Frog. Like, congratulations. Alright, let me update the, link in the, system here. Yeah, if anyone else joins live, like Bewitched Frog, you can type !paper in the chat, and the link will pop back up. And you can, of course, just click here, and you'll come here, and you can download the paper for yourself. Okie dokie. Yeah, I was thinking you had sent me some email. I'm like, I would clearly remember sending an email out, and I definitely didn't do that, but it was on stream. Yeah, so... Okay, so let's see what's going on. Oh no, Ocular's not working. Oh, there it is. Alright, so... Okay, so semantic blindness and error theorizing for the ambiguity theory of nose. Are you gonna... Hey, Bewitched Frog, are you gonna go to, like, some other, program, or is it just you decided, like, given the state of the world, that philosophy is not, the right business to be in? Which would be completely understandable. Anyway, continuing, I'll get back to Bewitched Frog in a minute. Semantic blindness and error theorizing for the ambiguity theory of nose. The ambiguity theory of nose hereafter ambiguity theory is the view that nose and its cognates have more than one propositional sense, that is, more than one sense that can be properly used in knows that, etc. constructions, such that which sense of nose is used in a knowledge ascriptions determines in part the semantic content, and thus the truth conditions of that knowledge ascription. Okay, so that means since there's a bunch of different senses or meanings or something or others about knows, that even just using the term knows in a sentence affects how to interpret it. So it's not like you're interpreting the truth of what you say you know, but that changes. It's not a transparent term, and so that knows is actually adding something to the content there. And so that's ambiguous what then you are talking about, because if you are changing the content and then also trying to evaluate it, things get ambiguous. Okay, the ambiguity theater. I checked the faculty, they're not really confident about their teaching and research. Okay, cool. So if it's not a good fit for you, you don't like what they're up to, that's great. Yeah, go find some place that if they like you and you have to like them. So that's important. The ambiguity theory has received relatively little attention in recent years, especially compared to prominent views about the truth conditions of knowledge descriptions like epistemic contextualism. However, a handful of philosophers have defended positions that fall within the ambiguity theory family of views. Elsewhere, I've discussed some of the merits of ambiguity theory. In this paper, I seek to go on the defensive and address a prima facie weakness of ambiguity theory, namely that, as Patrick Rice notes, we are intuitively invariantists about knows. Oh yeah, and feel free to ask questions, and I apologize for how I pronounce everyone's names. Most of us don't have the gut reaction that nose is ambiguous when we first start considering the matter. Rather, to most, nose initially seems to be univocal. It seems natural to think that if the ambiguity theory is right, that this is not how nose would seem, but that nose would instead seem ambiguous. Thus, the fact that most of us have the initial intuition that nose is univocal, combined with the fact that such an intuition is not what we might be expected to have on the ambiguity theory, together count against the ambiguity theory, unless defeating conditions can be provided. Now, this is weird, right here. I mean, maybe to most of us, it seems to be univocal. I mean, I suspect to most of us, we haven't really thought about it, except you're crazy philosophers, and if you're like me, then you've lost all your intuitions or whatever those things are supposed to be. So why would it seem univocal? It just would seem to be maybe restricted to some major uses, I would say. Like, when people say, I know it, they're just saying they're sure about the fact. And so it's, but I'm sure if you push them, you could be like, well, you could say it in a few different ways. And they say, yeah, but there's a main way. And that's usually what I think they're talking about. Now, then if you're going to press on the other ones and be like, well, these are legit uses of the word no, then I'm sure people would throw their hands up and say, well, yeah, but like normally is what we mean is the one thing. Okay. In what follows, I aim to offer such defeating conditions in the form of an error theory to discount this presumption against the ambiguity theory. I conclude that the initial appearance of invariantism about nose is less of a problem than it initially seems, and that intuitive invariantism about nose is an insufficient reason to gloss over the ambiguity theory. Thus, just as contextualists like Cohen and DeRose have offered an error theory to try to explain our semantic blindness of context sensitivity of nose, so I'll provide an error theory to try to explain our semantic blindness of the ambiguity of nose. Okay, so instead of saying, look, nose is ambiguous, they're saying, well, we're just blind to how it's univocal. To the error theory. Okay, yeah. So instead of attacking the result, they're attacking the presuppositions here. Good strategy. If you're going to do something, this is a nice way to... I really like this, at least in terms of explaining what you're doing in your paper right here. This is good. As far as for understanding on what you're up to in writing a philosophy paper. You're not knocking them down, you're attacking their presuppositions, and so this is a good, this person has, well, I'll just say they've very clearly outlined what they're up to, and they haven't just sat there and bullet pointed, which I sometimes criticize in papers. This defense occurs in two primary parts. First, I aim to show that we are intuitive invariantists about a lot of other words which are clearly ambiguous. Second, I aim to show that the nature of the ambiguity of nose has several features which makes it the ideal sort of ambiguous word that we'd be apt to fail to realize is ambiguous. Now, see, this is what the crux of the argument is. We're going to be apt to fail at something. And so they're saying something about people that we are apt to fail just in general. This is how knowledge is. And so that's actually a very strong claim. But, so that's the interesting part of this. I think that's kind of hard to pull off, to tell you the truth, but we'll see how the author does. The ubiquity of intuitive invariantism about ambiguous words. As I am using the term ambiguity, it is restricted to instances of a single word having more than one sense. That is lexical ambiguity. So it's like bank and bank. Lexical ambiguity can be broken into two types. Homonymy, which occurs when the different senses of a word are not closely related. Hey, like bank or bear. Yeah. So like the bank of the river, or the bank, like the financial institution, or I guess bear left and bear the animal. And two, polysumming, which occurs when the different senses of a word are closely related, often with a shared etymological root. Words like arch or crane. Okay, so I guess an arch enemy... or an arch is like a curve. I don't know why arch or crane. Okay, maybe. Any plausible version of the ambiguity theory will consider nose to be a polyseme, and then move. Okay, so the different words all sound the same because they're all related, sort of historically, I guess, etymologically. And in moving ahead, we will be concerned mostly with the nature of polysemes. Thus, more accurately, the first part of my error theory for the ambiguity of no's is showing that we often fail to notice polysemy, and that as a result, we shouldn't be surprised that we often fail to notice the polysemy of no's too. I don't think we fail to notice polysemy. Why would we fail to notice polysemy? We don't really get confused when we're using a word in different ways, but that's like saying, it's like, look, there's a bunch of words that are closely related, like, so it's like these words, and so it's like you're kind of using a more general sense of the word, but we don't get confused about that. We know when the words mean something different because you know when you mess up. Alright, anyway, to begin, take the Polysumming newspaper in the following conversation. Be careful if you go outside. I read in the newspaper this morning that a lion escaped from the zoo last night. Oh my god. B, no need to worry. The newspaper just printed a retraction on their website. A, really, why? It turns out the article in the newspaper was just the result of a prank pulled by an intern. A, wow. I bet the newspaper didn't waste any time before firing that intern. Okay. The first and third uses of a newspaper refer to the physical paper and ink objects which a paperboy might throw at your door. Who does that? Well, they do that. The second and fourth uses refer to the organization whose function is to manage, write the content for, and print the physical newspaper. Given their conversation, it seems likely that A and B each understand both senses of newspaper and are able to fluidly change usage between senses. But what would A and B say if asked whether newspaper is ambiguous, or asked if they had changed back and forth between the senses of newspaper during the conversation? Newspaper is ambiguous, and A and B did change back and forth between the senses of newspaper during the conversation. However, it seems plausible that A and B will get the answer to these questions right only if they first reflect on the conversation of how they had used the term newspaper. My contention is that nose works like that. We have the ability to use and switch between the terms senses fluidly in conversation, but without reflection, we are usually unaware of doing any sense selection or sense switching when using the term in conversation. I actually completely disagree with this analysis. I think, well, no, I agree to like up to a point with this analysis. Right here, of course they know they're talking about the newspaper as an organization and newspaper as the physical thing. They clearly do, because this wouldn't make any sense otherwise. The problem is that most people haven't thought that deeply about ambiguity, so they're like, what is ambiguous here? Because there's nothing ambiguous in this conversation. They all understood everything that happened, and so there is no ambiguity here because they all understood things. And so that's really the problem, is that they aren't philosophers who are nitpicking the different senses of the word newspaper as object and newspaper as organization. And so we've already got, I think, some sort of, like, this is sort of the diagnosis I'm finding along here. This is not to say this paper is wrong. This is not actually going to be a critical problem, because this sort of problem actually isn't very rarely critical. But it's just a slight beef I have with this analysis right here. Like, this sort of problem is actually always can be fixed. Like, this is a fixable problem. Of course, more needs to be said in developing this line of reasoning. For why does it seem likely that A and B, if they reflect on the matter, would come to the conclusion that there is more than one sense of newspaper, while many, even after having carefully reflected on the matter, do not conclude that no, as used in ordinary English, has more than one sense? At least part of the answer might rest with the fact that newspaper in both senses functions as a concrete noun, and there is an ease with which the distinct things picked out by the nouns can be shown to be separate. This is not as easy with most other parts of speech. Yeah, this is a good example in the sense that organizations and physical objects are not usually confused. Let's turn to verbs, starting with the verb make. Initially, if asked whether the word make is ambiguous, I suspect many would say that it is not. Make is not like bank, and bank, well, this is different kinds of ambiguity. Make is not like bank. Bank, we can straightforwardly say either you made it or you didn't make it. You made it or you didn't make it. So these are versions of the word make, made or make. But if one takes time to reflect on the nature of make, one will see that this isn't so. If I say, for example, that you made the train, there are several things I could sensibly be saying in English, even when the reference of you and the train are fixed. I could be saying that you arrived at the train successfully before it departed, or I could be saying that you were the one who crafted or constructed the train by putting the pieces together. Yeah, you could be the engineer or the designer. Similarly, if I say she made history, I could be claiming that her actions will keep her remembered, or it could be claiming that while she may not be remembered herself, she was the one who shaped how the record of facts will be remembered and conveyed. The Merriam-Webster Dictionary, the Webster-Merriam Dictionary. Was it me, or was it Merriam-Webster or Webster-Merriam? I can't remember. For example, has 25 listings for the word make. I think a set always takes the different senses victory. It has some huge amount of using the word set. But yeah, make probably has tons of slightly different uses. Common verbs like have, make, and want play a structural role in the English language whereby they need to be able to cover a wide variety of situations in which a certain specific set of the actions are not as important as more coarse-grained features. To take the example of make again, when the specifics of how one crafted an item are important, one might say, I carved this statue, I weaved this basket, I baked this cake. However, if one is interested only in conveying that she is the artist for all the objects, one might say, I made this statue, this basket, and this cake. The verb we use very frequently, like make, are often used so frequently. The verbs we use frequently, like make, are often used so frequently precisely because of their flexibility. Know is the 8th most commonly used English verb. It seems sensible that know would have the same type of flexibility as other common, more coarse-grained verbs. This is not to say that know cannot be used as a technical term to pick out a particular epistemic relation of import, like some philosophers have done with the term understand. But, yeah, I mean, there's formal epistemology. Know means a very specific thing in that area. But such a technical use does not negate other uses outside the technical context. Newspaper and make provide us with examples of a more general trend noted by linguists, namely that ambiguity. See, I'm getting a little worried here. They suggest different uses of the word, and they may not be ambiguous. Namely that ambiguous is ubiquitous, and that our savvy negotiations with subtly ambiguous terms allow us to fail to notice what we're doing. Yale Ravin and Claudia Leacock note this point, writing that we are so adept at using contextual clues that we select the appropriate sense of words effortlessly and unconsciously. The sheer number of senses listed by some sources as being available come as a surprise. As out of approximately 60,000 entries in Webster's 7th dictionary, 21,488, or almost 40%, have 2 or more senses according to Bird. Moreover, the most commonly used words tend to be the most polysymous. The verb run, for example, has 29 senses in Webster's, further divided into nearly 125 subsenses. Alright, so maybe run is the wins for the most senses. Thus, while initially the fact that most of us are intuitive invariantists seems to account in favor of invariantism, this presumption in favor of invariantism is significantly undercut by the fact that we are also intuitive invariantists about many other ambiguous words. Yeah, I'm a little worried about this use of ambiguous. I mean, things are ambiguous not because there's multiple senses of them. Just because there's multiple senses of them, that's normal. I mean, it's like you can be a sense is ambiguous when there's multiple sentences, and you also don't know which one is being employed right there. Like if you said, "I saw the bank," you don't know if you saw a financial institution or a geographical feature. That's an ambiguous sentence. But the word bank itself, has multiple senses, but the ambiguity doesn't lie in the multiple senses. The ambiguity lies in the ambiguous use of those senses where you can't tell which one is which. And so I'm a little worried here. Like at first when I was said the target was off earlier, I mean, you can fix that up, but this is continuing that. So I think the sense of ambiguity here is ambiguous. So, because, I mean, it's one thing to do that at the beginning, it's not a big deal, but it looks like this is continuing, that the word run is not no one thinks of that as ambiguous. You might think of it as many senses, but it's only ambiguous, in context in some sense. Yeah. Because, I mean, as this whole point is to show right here, that 40% of words, I mean, it's almost half of our words have more than one sense. It's a normal state of the world for this to be that way. So, it's so either we are all mistaken about what ambiguous means, or we just haven't, this isn't what ambiguous means. And I think that the author's saying, well, we're mistaken about what it means to be ambiguous. And I'm saying, look, this is just not what ambiguous means. So we may have just a little semantic disagreement there. Okay, continuing. And feel free to ask questions, of course, anyone out in the audience. But this understanding effect is not complete, for in the case of words like newspaper, make, and run, while we may initially be intuitive invariantists, if given enough time to reflect, most of us are willing to acknowledge that these terms are polysemous. But it isn't so with the case of nose. Many people resist accepting that nose is polysemous even after reflection. Thus, a full explanation for the alleged semantic blindness that comes with the ambiguity theory will also provide reasons for this extra resistance that nose is ambiguous over and above the normal sort of inattentiveness we experience to the ambiguity of many other words. In the next section, I offer 3 suggestions as to why our intuitions about invariantist nature of nose might be particularly obstinate, even if the ambiguity theory is correct. I invoke these explanations to further diminish the potential undercutting effect of intuitive invariantism against the ambiguity theory. 2. An ambiguity of nose-specific error theory. Here I offer 3 additional reasons why our invariantism about nose might be particularly obstinate, even if the ambiguity theory is true. The first deals with the transient and developmental nature of polysemy and the multifunctionality of nose. The second deals with the nature of multivocal words and sense recognition across linguistic community. The third deals with the history of philosophy as an academic discipline. The intended upshot of these arguments is to show that because nose is a type of word that, even if ambiguous, we should expect to be intuitive invariantists about, it doesn't count much against the ambiguity theory that we are intuitive invariantists. I do like this person's argumentation here. This is not like they're outlining their argument, but it's like it's not an outline. It's sort of giving you a flavor of the argument and then going and doing it. So it's like it's not just giving you, like I said earlier, I sometimes criticize bullet points, but I do kind of like how this person has sort of given you a structure and then is now going to fill it in. So the first point deals with the nature of polysemy itself in relation to the many uses which... See, it's a nature. Let me just say that better. It's not just a structure. It's like a sort of like a preview of the argument. It's not just giving you a bullet point structure. So preview's better than just a raw structure as far as writing goes. The first point deals with the nature of polysemy itself in relation to the many uses with which the word nose functions. Polysemy is neither a necessary nor eternal property of a word. Rather, it is something that develops often slowly and subtly over time. Similarly, it is something that can disappear slowly over time. Take the word want. Its primary meaning in 21st century English is desire, as I want, that is, desire a new car. There's also its more archaic meaning as lack or need, which in contemporary discourse typically only shows up in select constructions like she wants for nothing, that is, lacks for nothing. He is in want, in need. The usage of want in this latter way remains common enough such that this and the former sense of want together constitute a case of ambiguity for want. See, this is what I'm saying. You have to get them together for there to be ambiguity. But there may come a point where the usage of want in the archaic sense becomes so marginalized and uncommon in the word ceases to be ambiguous between those senses. Such a process would likely be slow, perhaps has already begun, and there would no doubt be a lengthy period where it is unclear whether want remains ambiguous. The good example of this is from Shakespeare, where I forget what it is, but it's a very famous speech, and it starts off with saying, "The king is kind." And of course, nowadays, kind of course usually implies good features, nice. But the king is kind is, in that sense, it's talking about kind in what we still use as a type, but it's not a good thing. It's like saying he's a nasty character. He's saying he's of a certain sort of scummy character, and that's kind of how what Shakespeare's saying. So when you say the king is kind, you're saying he's a certain scummy type of person. Like he's a type of person. You know the type of person. So it's like saying he's a type of person. But you wouldn't say that with the word kind anymore. So the ambiguity in kind has gotten farther in contemporary English than from Shakespearean English. So, I mean, this would be sort of a longer term like sort of this is what happens because kind has lost this sort of like typed understanding that that it used to have. Okay, continuing. Conversely, as our understanding of the world and the world itself continues to change, so does our language. These changes often result in new cases of ambiguity and of polysumming. Take the word web, which in the internet age gained new sense as used in the phrase World Wide Web. The clear connection between the word's original sense as used in the phrase the spider's web and this new sense makes web a good case of a polyseme. The internet gave us a new linguistic purpose of sorts via a development in the needs and interests of English speakers, and it was our past usage of the term web as referring to the structures created by spiders along with the salient features we wanted to capture about the nature of the networks forming the internet that led up to our adoption of the new sense of web. In the case of web, it was clear that the word was gaining new meaning, and it happened in a relatively quick and concrete fashion. But subtler changes in the needs of speakers led to subtler implementations of ambiguity. I mean, this also is a very weird use of ambiguity. Things can take on new meanings. That doesn't make the new meanings ambiguous. Like, we're just going to reuse a word. Is that always a case of ambiguity? That seems a little strange to be using ambiguous in that sense, that the World Wide Web, for the web, if you use web in terms of the internet and web in terms of a spider's web, again, it's just multiple usage. It's not necessarily, I would say, the ambiguous usage of the word is, how do you understand that? Again, I don't think it's in the word. It's in the usage somewhere. Alright, continuing. Again, don't take my opinions for anything. Who knows if I'm right about much. My claim is that something like this has happened in the case of nose too, as has been shown by the difficulties in reaching consensus in the Edward Craig-inspired project of trying to determine the reason why it's valuable to speakers to pick out certain individuals as knowers. There likely isn't one such purpose or reason. Rather, it seems far more likely that there are a set of related epistemic reasons as to why such labels are valuable. Distinctions among those purposes likely have developed over time. Thus, it's plausible to suppose that the polysumming of nose is something that has been developing subtly and slowly over time in accordance with evolving human needs for more nuanced epistemic language. If the development at this point is either somewhat recent or incomplete, or both, this could help mask the ambiguous nature of nose and make it harder to detect even upon reflection. Thus, the developmental history of the ambiguity of nose may be a factor that helps explain semantic blindness. Aha! I think I finally understand what's going on with this author. Here we go. Developmental history. Developmental history of the ambiguity of nose. I mean, is that just a history of language? Why should that be prioritized? Why should we think that the history that will explain semantic blindness? Maybe we were blind in the past. So here's a question for you, author. Why is this, it looks like we're getting some sort of a Jean-Jacques Rousseau, the state of nature is where we have to go back and see, we have to help mask the ambiguous nature, as if like there was something to uncover here. I don't know. It's like this sort of thing is sort of not how I go about thinking about these things, so I have a disagreement now. But this is where the nature of the disagreement is. Are we unmasking about something of nose, or have we been trying to refine our what we understand of nose? See, that's why I don't think it's ambiguous, because I think we're getting better. This here makes it seem like in the past there might have been a proper usage, and then it's getting more and more ambiguous with the different sort of usage of nose over time. But yeah, I'm not sure about that. You'd have to... Yeah, see, there's a disagreement between myself and the author. Okay. So, again, that's not necessarily a criticism. That's a disagreement between us. This leads to a second factor that might explain our resistance to the ambiguity of nose, namely, that not all senses of a term need to be understood by all the competent speakers of a language, particularly in the case of polysumming, in order for that word to count as ambiguous. Think about the words want and web once more. In the case of want, just about every current competent speaker of English understands that want has a sense similar in meaning to desire. However, there is no doubt that a smaller percentage of current competent speakers of English recognize a sense of want as deficiency or lack. But that doesn't change the fact that want is ambiguous. Similarly, in the case of web, particularly if we think about the situation in the 1980s, for example, a significantly smaller portion of the population was familiar with the newer sense of web than were familiar with the original sense of web. Actually, I think it would be in the early 90s, but not the 80s. I don't know when it was coined. The World Wide Web, I think, was a 90s phenomenon, but that's historical nonsense. But at some point, enough speakers recognized this new sense of the word web that the word gained this new meaning as a proper part of English, full stop. That such circumstances could arise in the case of subtle polysumming, like words like nose, is likely. Oh, sure. Sure. I'll take my own experiences as instructive here. Prior to starting my formal study of philosophy, it struck me as obviously that truly knowing something required infallible evidence. I was comfortable using the word in other settings, but I likely would have appealed to some sort of loose use explanation to justify those usages. In fact, this view of knowledge seemed so clear to me that a great deal of epistemological questions seemed to have obvious answers. I only came to see what the real problems were once I accepted that many other people didn't understand the term know to refer to a state of true belief with perfect warrant or infallible justification. It took me a number of tries before I could see why the obvious answer to the Gettier problem wasn't that the justification level in the scenarios Gettier gave was too weak to count as knowing, for example. Yeah, Gettier can mess people up if they don't get it the first time. I can appreciate that. And you're like, what's going on here? I've since come to see that many English speakers use the word know in ways I didn't recognize initially, and I've now accustomed myself to using and accepting these senses too. Similarly, it's not uncommon for a certain percentage of my undergraduate students to take it as intuitively obvious that what we mean when we say we know something is that we have an infallible true belief. Still others take it as obvious that we don't mean this, and still others lack a strong view or may even posit that we mean more than one thing. Yeah, so who are these that already think things are ambiguous? And I will say, I've run into people, and they completely lose their mind when you show them the Gettier problem, and they're like, what? And they're like, it blows their mind that like knowledge isn't justified true belief. Like, they're like, no! I'm like, yeah, it doesn't work. And one person was like, does this mean there's no knowledge? I'm like, no, of course there's knowledge. It just means that justified true belief can't get you there by itself. It's like, that's it. It's like justified true belief is too simple, in some sense. Too easy. Yeah. Okay, so, do I have anything to say about this? It's just like, yeah, this is just sort of, the fact that we don't understand everything, it's, of course we don't understand everything. And that could lead to a not understanding why some things are ambiguous. I mean, that's fair. One response to these data would be to say that a certain percentage of individuals are simply wrong about what knowledge is. Yeah, but it strikes me as harder to make the parallel claim that the significant portion of competent English speakers are simply wrong about what knowledge is or what we mean by knows. Well, they know what they mean when they're talking, because they're using the word competently. So, I mean, that's why when people react so bad, because they aren't using the word incorrectly. I mean, maybe they are, but that's a very small percentage. Rather, it seems to me more sensible to say that there is more than one sense for such terms, but that all these senses are closely related. However, in the case of many individuals, we can perhaps explain their inability to recognize knows as ambiguous in virtue of their recognize only one sense of knows, despite the availability of other senses. Many English speakers could be in this position, and knows could still be ambiguous. Thus, for some, their resistance to the polysumming of knows may be appropriately reflective of how they use and understand the word, yet still not accurately reflect the multiplicity of senses available in the English language. Well, this is a good general point. Like I said, I'm still have my disagreement about the use of ambiguity in this paper, but of course, I can guarantee you that there's plenty of senses of like as the author stated above, the word run has more senses than I could list off the top of my head, and so I'm not going to be able to do that. And so that would be like, I don't know, and so I wouldn't be able to recognize them all either. I was like, I'm sure there's some fine-grained understanding that I don't know. So that's a fair point, but yeah. I mean, are they wrong about what knowledge is? Well, am I wrong about what it means to run? I don't think so. I mean, that's not unclear. I mean, am I wrong about some specific sub understanding of what it means to run? Maybe. But overall, I got it pretty good. Assuming I'm a competent speaker of English, that is, of course, which is always questionable, too. Even with these explanations on offer, one might wonder why Yeah, and if anyone has any questions out there, please let me know. I mean, Berwickshire Frog, I love you. Even with these explanations on offer, one might wonder why epistemologists have been largely recalcitrant to conclude that knows is ambiguous. Given the careful attention paid by epistemologists to the nature of knowledge and the meaning of knowledge, it seems unlikely that so many bright and dedicated thinkers about knowledge would fail to notice that knows was ambiguous if it were. I think there is a plausible theory which works in tandem with the first two reasons I offered for a general resistance to the polysumming of knows that could explain the resistance of epistemologists to the acceptance of polysumming of knows, even if knows is in fact polysemous. This explanation is rooted in the history of analytic philosophy as an academic discipline in the 20th century. Despite our movement away from conceptual analysis as the dominant method of doing analytic philosophy in the latter half of the 20th century, the general framework of trying to come up with the proper analysis for important terms has remained an important function of Anglo-American analytic philosophy. This has been accompanied by a general aversion to appealing to ambiguity. Thus, the trajectory of analytic philosophy as a whole has guided philosophers away from identified polysemous nature of knows. Add to that the post-Gettier dominance of the quest for identifying the proper analysis of knowledge in epistemology, and it becomes easy to see how the lanes down which epistemologists were guided were ones that would cause them to avoid considering that knows might be polysemous. And as the lineage of thoughtful and intelligent epistemologists who failed to claim that knows was polysemous continued to grow, the more audacious it may have become to seem to claim that these epistemologists missed the mark in a rather fundamental way by failing to notice knows' polysemous nature. But on this theory, it's not the quality of the epistemologist, but rather accidents of history that make it easier for us now to suggest knows is polysemous. We've spent many years unable to reach consensus as to what the proper analysis of meaning of knows is, and in more recent years, other forms of non-traditional answers have been posed, such as Timothy Williamson's knowledge-first approach, Jason Stanley and John Hawthorne's interest relative invariantism, and Stuart Cohen and Keith DeRose's contextualism. These developments pave the way for consideration of ambiguity. If knows is ambiguous, the philosophers correctly identify this now need not... Wait, let me reread this sentence. If knows is ambiguous, the philosophers correctly identifying this now need not be any more intelligent or hardworking than the ones who came before, who mostly failed to do so. Rather, it is a historical accident that we are now in a better position to fully identify philosophically important polysemous terms. Because ideological change is often slow, given analytic philosophy's past, it shouldn't surprise us that epistemologists would be cautious to accept that knows is ambiguous, even if it is. So we've got a sociology of philosophy argument here, that the sociology of epistemology has somehow colored the discussion of what we understand the word know to be, which is an interesting argument. Again, because of my different bend on how I see the history here, this is not like the sort of thing I would argue, but it's an interesting way to go about it. It basically means that there's been trends in the history of philosophy, and we've gone too far one way, and maybe we have to go back another way. And so this is sort of like a diagnosis of what's going on. I don't know if it's explanatory or if it's just descriptive. I think the author wants it to be sort of like causally explanatory here. I would just go with like, well, maybe it's descriptive in what's happened. And we would draw different conclusions from it. But it's still an interesting theory right there of what's going on. Alright, so yeah, it goes to error theory then, because that's how they're seeing it. The error theory I've put forward in order to explain why many are so resistant to the ambiguity of knows can be summarized as follows. The specific form of ambiguity knows embodies is polysemy, in which the different senses of the word are closely related. Due to the ubiquity of polysemy and our subconscious adeptness as users of polysemous terms, we often fail to notice that words are polysemous. Beyond being Polysemous simpliciter, a number of specific features of the polysemy of nose, including that it is a commonly used verb, that its polysemy may be in its developmental phrase or phase. Phase, yeah, it would be a phase, and that not all the senses of nose available to a speaker of English may be recognized by all competent English speakers. Each makes it more likely that we would fail to notice or see upon reflection the ambiguity of nose. Finally, because modern analytic epistemology is part of a philosophical lineage in which identifying polysemy has often been discouraged, there is an additional explanation as to why analytic epistemologists and philosophers more generally have been intuitive invariantists. Probably even with this error theory in place, our intuitions about the univocality of nose remain more likely on invariantism than on the ambiguity theory, but I think the factors discussed in this paper serve to significantly lessen the level of support that any intuitive invariantism gives to invariantism over the ambiguity theory. Okay, very nice little paper here on epistemology of nose. So it's sort of a cutesy thing. They're doing the epistemology of the concept of epistemology here, like in terms of the nose. So you've got like a meta nose, and how do you know what no means? Very cute. Reflexive analysis here. Yeah. Now, I have some problems with this, but that's not to say this is a bad paper. It's a very good paper, because depending on the problems go to how you understand history. And so if you understand the history of the words and you're looking at it that way in sort of a more sociological bent, then this is great. So you're trying to tease apart the different meanings, and you're saying, look, the different meanings of know and knowledge are getting in the way of each other, and this is because of historical reasons, philosophical reasons, all sorts of different little things going on here. So if you are in this sort of this is how you're looking at it, this is great. Now me, I don't look at the problem this way, and so I'm not looking at the developmental history of the ambiguity of nose, because in some sense I don't think the ambiguity exists in the history. I think it exists in how we are using things, because you can always be very clear, like in the newspaper example up here, which was nice, when you say, look, the object, the newspaper, versus the organization, the newspaper. You can always just say, well, I bet you can swap out the you can say, I bet the managing editor didn't waste any time before firing that intern. So you could swap out a managing editor here or whatever for newspaper, and then there wouldn't be any ambiguity. And so in some sense, I think it's the use of the word in different ways that's where the ambiguity lies, not in the word itself or the understanding of the word itself. Because of course we can use the words in multiple ways. We do that constantly. So that's kind of where my intuitions, as it were, not my intuitions, that's where my philosophical complaint comes from. But other than that, like I said, if you're interested in this sort of sociology of philosophy, which is famously... What's up, Red? I missed most papers, so this might be completely off base, but is the idea to give something like genealogy of the conception of nose in order to push there being a semantic ambiguity? That is that's almost exactly what's going on here. They start it. You've got a kind of you're almost right. What they're saying is that they're trying to explain the semantic ambiguity by showing the genealogy of the concept of nose. So that's kind of what's happening right here. But you see, and my complaint is that you're starting off with the concept of ambiguity. It's like, well, I don't know if it's ambiguous, but see, if you do this sort of argument, then I think you've got the you've switched around what's important here. But that's kind of what happened here. So thanks for your question. Yep. Let's try to think if I have anything else to say. In some sense, like I said, I liked how this was written. They sort of set themselves up nicely in this paper. The author did. These sorts of things where you're looking at the dictionaries to get data, I find that a little I'm not in love with that sort of strategy, but it made sense, again, as you're looking at the history here. Yeah, I mean, I always know if I have to get out of my armchair, even to look at the dictionary, it's usually I'm messing something up. So, but and what works for me does not work for other people, and vice versa. Okay, so I guess that's about it for now. Unless there's any other questions, I'm going to call it, and hopefully I'll be back soon. So have a good day, everybody, and stay safe out there. Bye-bye.